So I'm Michael, I'm one of the co-founders of Valorant. Today I want to, in a way, pick up where Mark left, talking about the volumes of data and why we do and don't use it. I named it Bridging the Data Trust Gap. In the annual IBTTA meeting, the AI/ML group were asked what would they want to use AI and ML for in their operations. The kind of highest scoring answer was increasing revenue. Operationally, you can see at 5 and 6 was safety and congestion. Now, I want to make two notes here. First of all, we all ultimately need to make sure that our assets are running. So it's important that our assets are financially viable. But also, I'm not cynical about this. I don't think that that people are running, that we who are running these kind of critical assets really don't think that safety and congestion are important. I think the issue we have is that we don't really understand how we can use the data that we have in order to address these issues. And so that's really what I want to touch upon is why do we feel that way and what can we do about it? I think this is most exemplified by a kind of comment that we hear time and time again when we talk to CIOs and CTOs of major concessions. And they keep on telling us, we have all this data and we don't know what to do with it. I guess the context for this is, as Mark said, the sheer amount of data that we're seeing. Just a single toll road that we work with that's about 45 kilometers long, 250,000 ADV, collects as many as 60 million data points every single day that is funneled through their control center. So we're talking data from video, from connected vehicles, from social media, navigation apps, phone calls, etc. So it is a vast amount of data. In stark contrast, you probably have 3 people in your control center. You have 3 people who are, some cases 1, some cases 10, but you have a handful of people in the control center that are facing this torrent of information and need in real time to understand what actions to take that will literally impact people's lives. And this stark juxtaposition between the amount of data and the amount of people brings to light both the potential of this data, but also the challenge. When we work with a lot of operators, we do see the potential. Through studies and also our experience, we've seen safety increases as much as 31%. We've seen drastic reduction in detection times. We've seen huge increase in the effectiveness and efficacy of our control centers. And so the ability to use this data can transform how we operate our roads and the standards that we're able to reach. And yet, when we go to these control centers, when we go to a lot of the operators, we see that ultimately these few people who are at the front line of our safety standards in our industry ultimately fall back on 3 tools: phone calls, manual CCTV validation, and patrol cars. So we have a huge amount of data coming in, and in response, what we often do as an industry is fall back to the manual tested tools that we know that work. There's a question here, why does this happen? Why are we not using this massive amount of data that's giving us almost complete coverage of every single event that's happening on our road? You see, we have cameras, we have connected vehicles, we have social media, we have navigation apps, we have data about weather, data about roadworks, data about events happening along our roads. So all this is there, but we're using manual tools. And this gap is what we call the trust gap. This is ultimately, we don't trust the data that's coming in. We don't trust it to tell us what we need to know when we need to know it, so we just don't use it. And there's a rationale behind that, because if I accidentally were to send a patrol to an accident that's not happening, and then an accident does happen, that's a huge risk that I just can't take. This is both operationally true, but also for the people who are in the control center who care about their job. Also emotionally true. Like we've heard stories about people not reaching a risk at time, and it's heart-wrenching. Like they are trying to do the best they can, and this is how they know to do it. So the question is like, why do we not trust the data and what to do about it? And if you had to kind of say one real reason of why we don't trust the data, it's noise. If anyone has tried to use Waze to manage their road, they will know that it's a big challenge. Waze is a very valuable data source, but the amount of noise it generates makes it really hard to work with. And you don't know what is true, what is not, and even if it is true, is it still happening? Is it in the place it's telling me that it's happening? Is it the event that it's telling me where it is? Like, all these questions come up, so ultimately you're saying, if the operator tries it once, it's not there, tries it twice, it's not there, tries it 3 times, it's not there, at some point, they're saying, you know what, I really need to answer this phone call from the patrol car because I know that that is something I need to attend to. And so this is really the question of noise is the big first thing that we need to be looking at, is how do we reduce the noise to focus on the things that really matter? And there's a second point here that we need to remember, is that this data that's coming to the control center, the control center is really the initial filter for the entire organization, right? It's coming in there. The data that you use, you can then keep on using. Now it is something that you've done with and you store it and you can start leveraging. But if you ignore it, it's gone forever. If you've not done anything about it, then you're not going to later go back and say, well, let me see why exactly Waze in July 2022, what exactly was the efficacy of Waze at that time. If you've not used it, not tested what's going on there, it's gone. So the question is, how do we reduce the noise? How do we focus? Sorry, graphic problem. But how do we focus on the data that does matter? And I'd say the first thing that we really need to do, and this is the most important, if you remember one thing from this talk, is use it or lose it, okay? The data that is coming at you, if you are not finding ways to use the data that is in and around your road, if you're not using it when it comes in, you're not going to use it. So find ways to use it. Find ways to start playing with it. Find ways to start seeing what it can tell you. We had a great example in Olympiados in the tech tour on Sunday with work that they're doing with adaptive lighting. It's awesome. Do stuff like that. Find ways to use it. Because when you use it, you learn what it's useful for and what's not useful for. Okay? But if ultimately, when it comes in, you're not making use of it for something, then it's gone. And by using it in one place, you make it available in others. An example is, if your control center is using this data, it's coming in, and it's starting to leverage it and respond to it, you can now then see, okay, what have I done about the data coming in? Now suddenly your internal operations and how you engage with that data become an asset in of itself. Now you can use that for analytics to see operationally, how do I improve? How can I improve my reaction time, my detection time, my response time? How can I improve my maintenance, my clearance time to instance? How does that impact my journey times, my revenues? The second you start using it, you see that every data coming into your control center actually touches upon every aspect of your operation, from maintenance to revenue optimization, to cost structures, to CapEx. So again, use it or lose it, most important thing. So you start using it though, and we have all this noise. So how can we try and reduce that noise over time to make sure that I'm seeing the most important things? Well, the data coming in, what you should do is label it. And when we say label it, oftentimes we think about false positives and false negatives in this industry, but that's actually not that interesting. What's interesting is it actionable or non-actionable? So if something comes in and say, now that I know this, was I able to do something about it? Yes or no? Because if you're not able to do something about it, if you only have 3 people in your control center, it doesn't help you if you have 3 stopped vehicles per 10 kilometers every hour. Because those 3 people are not going to be able to review hundreds of stopped vehicles every single day. So that's not actionable. So what is actionable? Okay, maybe if it's a stopped vehicle that's been there for over 10 minutes. I don't know. Think of something. What is actionable to you? What would you do about it? Now that you've labeled the things that are actionable and unactionable, you want to see what defines actionable, what defines unactionable, to allow you to kind of tighten your focus on the things that matter to you, that you can actually do something about, that you can improve your operations based on that. And here we do a segmentation. And this, by the way, is something that you can do. You don't need any provider. You don't need anyone to do it. You can do it yourself. You just want to take that data and say, what did this data say? Where was it? Where did this event happen? When did it happen? And how did I get it? What was the source? What, where, when, how? Okay. Now you have segments. You have segments of, these type of events came at this location at this time from this data source. Cameras, pedestrians on the road, cameras, by a bridge. And this data source gave me, accidents next to a port in the morning. And once you've divided that, you can start looking at what segments gave you the best amount or the least amount of noise that you're actually able to handle. And actually able to handle is important because when we look at control centers, usually a person in a control center can manage, let's say, depending on what other roles they have, and they have many other roles, but we're probably looking between 10 and 20 events per hour. This is the amount of things that they can feasibly handle. If you're giving them 50 events per hour, they're not going to use the system. You'll have another system in your control center they do not use. So do these segments, and then give them the highest value segments up to the amount that they can handle. And let them start using that data. Okay? And just accept that, I'm not going to see every single alert from my machine vision and from a Waze or TomTom or whatever. I'm not going to see all the events, but I'm going to see more events than I used to, and I'm going to start learning how to use them. So now that you've done this, you're actually able to focus much better on, on the highest value segments of the data that's coming in. Now, an important part, you're learning now how to use this data. So what also matters is, ideally, you leave a little bit of time for them so that they can experiment. You don't want to, because if they are continuously going back to back on, alert after alert after alert after the alert, they're not thinking, they're not helping you improve, they're not helping see how this can help their processes and how they can use this data more effectively. So you need someone, it doesn't have to be them, it could be a shift manager, it could be someone that's from your finance team or analytics team or operations team, to be able to work with them to understand how to improve over time. And that matters. Someone needs to have that capacity, because again, otherwise attrition, and it will, over time, just be reduced back to your manual processes. And if I had to summarize all this, though, again, I would say, just do it. Start using the data. Okay? It makes a difference. This data has the opportunity of saving lives, reducing congestion, reducing the journey times, making more people choose your road over its competitors. So start using it and seeing how your organization specifically can make the most out of it. Thank you.